Join us as we uncover 5 disturbing stories of wild animal attacks that will make you appreciate the safety of your home. From ruthless apex predators to people fighting for their lives, these untamed stories have it all. Prepare to be equally terrified and inspired. March 23, 2024 was a Saturday, and the opening day of junior turkey hunting season in Georgetown, California. But not everyone was going turkey hunting. Talon Robert Claude Brooks and his brother Wyatt J. Charles Brooks were antler shed hunting along Skid Road in a remote forested area of El Dorado County. The two brothers loved nature. They each had their favorite outdoor activity. 21-year-old Talon was an avid fisherman, while 18-year-old Wyatt preferred bow hunting. They enjoyed spending time together, and that Saturday was no different. That Saturday, they left their home in Mount Auckham and drove some 35 miles south. Once they reached the forested area, the brothers parked their car and began hiking, while also keeping an eye out for shed antlers. Finding shed antlers is a popular activity that attracts many enthusiasts, especially because it can be done while hiking or wildlife watching. Deer shed their antlers every year, usually from January to March, so Talon and Wyatt had every chance to find some to bring back home. Talon and Wyatt had grown up in this area, the wild foothills of California. They knew these woods and knew how to carry themselves out there, in the middle of nature. The day was unfolding as expected. The brothers were spending quality time together. But unbeknownst to them, they weren't alone. Deep in the shadows of the forest, a predator was waiting for the right moment to strike. It too was hunting, but it wanted something more than shed antlers. It was about 1 p.m. in the afternoon when the two brothers saw it. There it was, watching them with its big, haunting eyes. They couldn't let fear overcome them. After all, their lives were at stake. Since Saturday marked the start of the junior turkey hunting season, Talon and Wyatt had left their firearms behind to avoid scrutiny from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. But the two brothers knew exactly what to do, even without guns. Both of them started shouting. They waved their arms, trying to appear bigger. Nothing happened. The predator stared them down as if challenging the two brothers. Then Wyatt remembered something. He took his backpack off and threw it at the animal. It all happened in less than a second. The 90-pound mountain lion pounced on Wyatt, knocking the 18-year-old to the ground. Then it clamped its massive jaws on Wyatt's head. Talon acted on instinct, almost as quickly as the mountain lion. He couldn't just stand there and watch his little brother be mauled by a nightmarish predator. Desperate to save his brother, the 21-year-old attempted to pull the lion off. While Talon beat on the animal and yelled at it, Wyatt managed to get on top of it. That's when the lion clawed at Wyatt's midsection. The two brothers were no match for the animal. Now enraged and confused, the animal broke free and turned its attention to Talon. It bit Talon in the throat. Wyatt struggled to make the mountain lion release his older brother, but the animal was too strong. Terrified, the 18-year-old tried to call 911, but the cell service was poor. Wyatt knew that if he were to save Taylor, he had to leave him there. He ran back to their parked car, badly hurt, afraid, and heartbroken. He finally managed to call 911. First responders arrived soon after. They found Wyatt in a sorry state, his face, neck, and midsection bleeding. Taylor was nowhere to be found. After a quick search of the area, the sheriff's deputies discovered the mountain lion crouching next to Taylor. They fired their guns to ward the animal off and rushed to Taylor's aid. But it was too late. Taylor Brooks had died. He had died protecting his younger brother. As for Wyatt, he was taken to the hospital. His extensive injuries needed medical attention. He underwent reconstructive surgery for the major lacerations to his face and neck. The mountain lion was tracked down a little while later. Authorities found it in a tree near the site of the attack. Following the accident, the animal was euthanized. It was July 17, 2023, and Amber Rogers was over the moon. She had envisioned her trip to Yellowstone National Park for over a year, and now she was there. To make things even better, she was with the two people she loved most in the world, her boyfriend, Chris Whitehill, and her daughter, Riley. The three of them had spent every minute up until the trip saving money, talking about the walks they'd take and the wildlife they'd encounter. To be able to escape the grind of their everyday lives was a privilege and a reason for joy. They left their home in Phoenix and arrived at the park on July 16th, where they spent the first night resting and making plans for the next few days. They woke up early to soak in the beauty of Yellowstone. All three were filled with excitement. The air was crisp and the sky was clear blue. It was going to be an amazing trip. But first, they had to wake up properly. The three headed to the lodge for coffee. After that, they decided to take a walk to Yellowstone Lake. The lake was only a short distance away through a field teeming with all kinds of animals. There were a few other people taking the walk as well. They all watched about 20 elk roaming around in the field and waited respectfully for the animals to clear before proceeding on their walk. But about halfway to Yellowstone Lake, Amber, Chris, and Riley noticed two bison. One was on the path ahead some 50 yards away on the trail, barely visible in the shadow of the trees. The other was in the opposite direction. The group stopped in their tracks and looked at the massive animal on the path ahead. Chris then suggested they move away and give the bison his space. Being an outdoorsman, Chris knew any wild animal deserves respect. The bison in front rolled in the dirt much like a dog would. It was certainly a sight to behold, not something everyone gets the chance to see. But then the bison got up and locked eyes with them. It took a few tentative steps their way, and then began charging at full speed. It was as if the very ground split open as the bison closed the gap with terrifying speed. There was no place to hide, and then it all happened in the blink of an eye. The impact was brutal. The animal struck Amber head on. Suddenly, the woman was airborne. Chris watched in horror as his partner did one or two backflips in the air. He began screaming and yelling to distract the animal. Then he heard a loud thump, the sound Amber's body made as she landed hard on her back. Park rangers rushed to the scene of the accident. They put Amber on a stretcher and carried her out of the field to an ambulance. The 47-year-old was then transferred to a helicopter for a life flight to a hospital in Idaho. She was bruised all over, had 7 spine fractures and bilateral collapsed lungs. It was a miracle she was alive. It was there in the hospital that Chris revealed the real reason for their trip to Yellowstone. He had planned to propose there. As that was no longer possible, he got down on one knee and proposed to Amber beside her hospital bed. And Amber said yes, grateful to be alive and excited about her future with Chris. It was July 19, 2016, and Laura and James Hayworth were camping near Ghost River in the Waiparous area, Alberta, Canada. It was a hot day, and the sun shone brightly above. Located about 43 miles northwest of Calgary in the Rocky Mountain Forest Reserve, the area was an ideal spot for camping, not too far from civilization, but far enough to enjoy a beautiful day and a sense of peace. James and Laura were both aware that being in the middle of nature has its perils, so they had made sure to bring bear spray on their trip. They had practiced deploying the spray and were confident in their ability to use it. As they walked down to the river for a picnic and some sunbathing, they felt safe. The area was close to the main road and other visitors were around as well. After their picnic, the couple lay on the rocks, basking in the sun's warmth and the joy of each other's company. As they lay there with their eyes closed, Laura heard something. The 25-year-old was sure of it. There was a rustling sound coming from somewhere behind her. She opened her eyes and caught a glimpse of brown fur. Could it be wolves? Her blood ran cold. Laura turned to her husband and alerted him that they were in danger. They quickly stood up and urged themselves to remain calm. By now, their senses were on high alert. They could almost taste the fear. As they scanned the area, the couple spotted 2 bear cubs near the tree line. Sure, the cubs were cute, but the Hayworths knew better than to approach them. They were aware that the sight of bear cubs is always a warning sign. A mother bear is likely nearby, ready to defend her young with her life. What should they do? Should they run? Should they play dead? There was no time to decide. Suddenly, the mother bear charged out of the trees, racing towards them at full speed. They knew they couldn't outrun her. James tried to scare her away by yelling, but it had no effect. The bear was an unstoppable force. It knocked James to the ground almost instantly. He quickly got back up and urged Laura to head for the river, hoping it might offer a chance to escape the bear's fury. He too tried to run, but the bear was quicker and more determined. It caught up with James and slammed him into the water, standing over him. James thought he was done for, left at the mercy of an enraged mother bear. But Laura wasn't about to watch her husband die. She grabbed her bear spray, but it malfunctioned. Not only was she unable to help her husband, but she herself was now the bear's target. The mother bear charged at her with an ear-splitting roar. It knocked Laura to the ground. She was simply too overpowered. Instinctively, she raised her arms to shield her head. The bear's massive jaws and huge teeth shattered her wrist bones. Laura dropped the bear spray. Desperate to save his wife, James scrambled to his feet and ran toward the bear, screaming and shouting. Undeterred, the bear began dragging Laura away by her arm. Finally, the bear saw James. Miraculously, it got startled and released Laura before running away with its cubs. The Hayworths were grateful to be alive, but they feared the bear might return. James dragged Laura across the river and toward safety. He kept yelling to keep the bear at bay. They were eventually heard by other people, one of whom guided the couple back to their car, while others called for help. James didn't want to take any chances and decided that waiting for an ambulance was too risky. He opted to drive Laura to the hospital himself. While on the road, they ran into first responders. After receiving first aid, Laura was airlifted to the hospital with a broken arm and multiple puncture wounds. James was fortunately not hurt. The Hayworths believed the bear wasn't trying to kill them, but rather to scare them away from its cubs. Authorities agreed, concluding there was no need to euthanize or relocate the bear. On October 15, 2022, a Saturday, 4 wrestling teammates from Northwest College decided to go shed antler hunting. Brady Lowry, Kendall Cummings, Orrin Jackson, and August Harrison had picked a spot near Cody, Wyoming, close to the picturesque Bobcat Houlihan trailhead. They had just finished practice when they embarked on this new adventure. After driving for about half an hour, they finally arrived at the spot they picked. They set out in search of elk, moose, or deer antlers, hoping to bring back some impressive finds. They spent the day enjoying each other's presence. They were friends as well as teammates. As evening approached and temperatures dropped, Orrin Jackson and August Harrison decided it was time to get back. But Brady Lowry and Kendall Cummings wanted to search for a little longer. They didn't want to go home empty-handed. As such, they parted ways with Orrin and August, who started the hike back to their car. Brady and Kendall continued searching along the South Fork, enjoying the fading light. Soon after, Brady noticed something that made him stop in his tracks, his heart racing. Scattered bear droppings covered the ground beneath their feet. This could mean only one thing. A grizzly bear was near, too near for comfort. As soon as he let Kendall know, a massive grizzly bear burst from the willows, charging straight at them. The bear tackled Brady in an instant, knocking him down to the ground. Its jaws clamped down on the young man's arm with tremendous force, snapping it like a twig. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, Brady curled into a ball, but it was no use. The creature was undeterred. It continued to maul Brady, biting his back, buttocks, and shoulder. Kendall watched in horror. He knew he had to help his friend, but how could he be a match for a grizzly? He wasn't a big man, but he was brave and he cared about his friend. Kendall charged at the bear, yelling and pulling at its thick brown fur. The bear was furious. Kendall managed to free Brady from the creature's rage, but he was now the target of its attack. It pinned Kendall to the ground. The bear's teeth tore into the young man's arms and face, leaving deep wounds. Just as it seemed Kendall would meet his untimely end, the grizzly inexplicably stopped and ran back into the willows. But then the bear was back, biting Kendall's face and head once more. Yet as quickly as it began, the bear left again. It was incredible and miraculous. Kendall managed to get back to his feet, bleeding heavily from his wounds. His cries for help reached Orrin and August, as well as Brady, who had run to get help as soon as the bear turned its focus on Kendall. Together they brought Kendall back to the car, where emergency responders were waiting. Kendall was flown to St. Vincent Healthcare in Billings, Montana, while Brady was taken to Cody Regional in Wyoming, before also being flown to St. Vincent. They both suffered serious injuries requiring extensive medical care. Brady credits their survival to Kendall's bravery, their unbreakable bond as teammates, and something larger than themselves that seemed to guide them through the harrowing ordeal. It was August 13, 1967. Glacier National Park's busiest season meant that a great number of tourists were visiting the park on a daily basis. The park's lodges were fully booked, and its souvenir shops were open to anyone who wanted something to remind them of Glacier. It was business as usual at the park. 19-year-old Julie Helgeson had a day off from her job in the laundry at East Glacier Lodge. Julie and her boyfriend, 18-year-old Roy Duckett, wanted to hike to a camping spot and then spend a romantic night under the starry sky near the Granite Park Chalet, which was packed with tourists. The couple arrived at about 7 p.m. and set up camp near the chalet. Julie and Roy ate their packed meals and watched the sunset. Being out there in the wild felt extraordinary. They felt like nothing could go wrong, despite being warned earlier in the day about camping at this particular spot because grizzlies frequented the area. However, they decided to stay, reasoning that in all the park's 57-year history, there hadn't been a single grizzly attack. They believed they would be fine. As lightning lit the skies, Julie and Roy snuggled into their shared sleeping bag and fell asleep, oblivious to what was to come. Julie woke up shortly after midnight and quickly realized why. She saw the bear meandering over them. Julie woke Roy up, whispering for him to stay quiet. They tried to play dead, but to no avail. The bear approached and then pounced on Julie. It then turned his attention to Roy, biting on and clawing at his arms and legs. Despite being terrified, Roy tried to stay as still as possible. Maybe that's why the bear decided Julie was a better target. The grizzly sank its teeth into Julie, dragging her about 100 yards away. Roy sprinted to a neighboring camp for help. He was badly hurt, but he knew he had to try, otherwise Julie wasn't going to make it. Help arrived soon after. A helicopter took Roy Duckett to the hospital, and park rangers had to decide what to do about Julie. Surely they had to search for her. But wouldn't that put other people at risk? They decided to wait a couple of hours and left to search for Julie only after the arrival of an armed ranger. They spotted Julie not very far below the campsite at the end of a bloody trail. She was face down, horribly mauled. "It hurts," she said over and over again. Julie Helgeson died at about 4:12 a.m. on a makeshift operating table at the chalet, before the helicopter could airlift her out. Across the park, Michelle Coons and her friends were camping on Trout Lake's shore. It wasn't where they had intended to spend the night, but a baffling encounter with a grizzly some hours ago was enough to make them change their minds. Soon after making camp, a hungry mother bear approached them and stole some of their food. This prompted them to move their sleeping bags to the shore and light a campfire. Surely this would keep the bear away. They drifted off to sleep only to be awakened at about 4:30 in the morning. The grizzly was back. It bit into one of the sleeping bags. The campers jumped out of their sleeping bags and climbed up trees. But Michelle Coons wasn't as lucky. She couldn't get her sleeping bag to open. When the grizzly approached her, the 19-year-old started screaming, which enraged the bear. The animal dragged her away, its jaws tearing at Michelle's arm. "He's got my arm off. Oh God, I'm dead." The others heard her scream before she disappeared into the woods. Almost 2 hours later, Michelle's friends climbed down from the trees and went looking for help. Rangers found Michelle Coons's mutilated body hours later. She was dead. The grizzly was later found and killed. Its stomach contained a clump of blonde hair. The horrifying events of the early hours of August 13, 1967, came to be known as the Night of the Grizzlies. Many of the safety protocols regarding bears that we have today were created after the tragic loss of Julie Helgeson and Michelle Coons.